thought, oh, maybe we could pass, someone's done this before. So don't fall into the trap of thinking someone's done this before, unless you know they 100% have done exactly the same thing as you, because if yours is different, then they haven't done it before. So yeah, like I said, the prior art, well, we call it the prior art. So anything published before I file my application is the art. And this does include IGEM Wikipedia pages as well, PhD theses, websites, conference talks. So could make your invention obvious if somebody is suggested to do those things. So also, if you are writing any academic papers, don't speculate too much, because one day you might want to do that stuff, and you could kind of ruin your chances of patenting something. So this is just examples of some novel and inventive things. So people might express a protein in a certain host species, but you find you express it in a different one. So you're just changing the host species and you've got reduced immunogenicity. Or you might keep it in the same host species, but you mutate the microbe and now you get better secretion. So on the face of it, these might be small changes that you might think are obvious to do, but they've got a technical effect. And unless there are documents out there saying to do this, then they could well be inventive. So this is what one of our clients does. So they've got RT-PCR-based probes with a fluorophore, and they found if you move the fluorophore in a few nucleotides, it's much better. So again, you think, oh, all you're doing is moving the fluorophore in a little bit. Doesn't feel like a big change, but who out there suggested to do that? Nobody. So it's new and it's inventive. Again, you can just change different media. Single amino acid changes can be inventive. Combinations of known things. So it's very legitimate to get a patent to a new combination of known things. So this was actually from one of my papers. So we've got one drug, we've got another drug. If you put them together, it pretty much killed the yeast. So that could have been patentable because nobody's put that combination together, and it's got a technical effect. And then, yeah, we've got different buffers which could improve stability of various compounds. So these are all Well, one thing I realized when I started in this job is the inventions we work on are not mega mind-blowing, like, I don't know, the equivalent, I guess, of a CRISPR. They are all these kind of small changes. Someone's made something a little bit better or made something a little bit more accurate. So don't dismiss any inventions you think you've got just because you don't think they're like big enough. So if you've got something, then you need to think when to file. So as I said before, if we file something today, anything published before today can be citable against us. So on the one hand, we want to file our application as early as we can. Because if we file today and yesterday somebody published something really harmful, that's bad for us. Whereas if we'd filed last week, then that document wouldn't count. So the sooner you can file, the better, because there's less chance of harmful documents being out there. But especially in the biotech space, we do need some data. So if I came up with an engineering widget, so say it's a new stapler, I don't even need to have made that. I can just draw it in my patent. The laws of physics say if I put this bit here, it's going to work. So a lot of engineering patents, you don't even have to have a prototype. That's fine. But because biology is inherently unpredictable, getting more predictable, but I don't know when the patent officers are going to believe all the kind of AI modeling and things like that, we do need some wet lab data. So if your model predicts making these mutations will make the enzyme more active, fine, you're going to have to show it. It doesn't have to be loads of data. It can be in vitro. We just need something to kind of make it plausible that actually it does work. Or if you've got a new, I don't know, a drug that you think is going to treat cancer, you don't have to go into mouse models. You don't have to go in, certainly don't do clinical trials because that's too late. But if you can tie the kind of drug to a receptor and the receptor is known to be, if you modulate the receptor, it kills cancer, that can be enough to file a patent on. So it's a toss-up between get it filed as soon as you can, but you do need some data. And then an important thing to know is the way the patent system works, we tend to have a 12-month window in which we can add data. So if we file an application today, you've got 12 months to kind of get that extra data and add it to it to support what we're trying to claim. But after 12 months, that's it. We cannot add anything else. So you need to time it right that you think you're going to get the data within those 12 months. And then, we've covered this earlier, I suppose, like where to file. So you don't file everywhere straight away. You use this international filing system, really, the PCT process, which delays the decision making around where to file for 2.5 years or so, because by then you've got more idea of where your business is going, who your partners are going to be. You've hopefully raised some money to pay for this, because once you file in lots of countries, it does get more expensive. So that's also all I'll say on that, but it's something to build into your IP strategy. This is just a slide that I've included, which I won't really talk through, but it's just to give you some kind of general information. So like I said, at 0 month today, we'd file what we call it a priority application. And that is normally essentially just to get your filing date. So file today, we've got our prior art date of today, really. So anything published before today can be cited against us, anything after can't. At the 12-month mark here, then we would file a PCT, which is like I said, the international kind of filing system. And then you don't really need to do anything until you get to the 31 month point, and that's the deadline for deciding which countries you want to go into. I can see a question. Do I do that now?
Only if you want. I can wait after
No, fine.
the lecture. No. Yeah, I wanted to mention that Argentina is not part of the PCT.
No, it's not. No, thank you.
No. So just for the rest
it's one of the ones that we learn in exams. We must do it at the same time as filing the PCT. No, you're right. But you can still, there are ways of still making use of this system.
Yeah, normally people here use file in other countries, especially in the US. Yeah.
So there are still ways of using this delaying kind of tactic. But thank you. So the next thing I just wanted to touch on quickly, and it does differ between countries and it will differ between institutes if you are working at a university or have been, is the inventorship and ownership situation. So in the UK, in many places, the first owner is the actual inventor. So if I invent something, I own it. But if I'm employed, then my rights automatically go to my employer. So if I invent something at Potter Clarkson that's to do with my job, it is not mine, it is Potter Clarkson's. So yeah, obviously most of the biotech companies I work with, they have scientists who will invent for the company and their rights will belong to the company. This is the same in most universities. And each university will have a different policy, but in most places, if you're employed by the university, so if you're a postdoc or a research fellow or you're a group head, any of your IP will belong to the university. So I have a lot of conversations with people wanting to take their research out of the university and, you know, set up their own companies, which they can't really do unless they've got the permission from their tech transfer office. So first of all, you need to, and I'll touch on this briefly when I talk about investor due diligence and things. If you're setting up a company based around some IP, you need to have it documented as to who owns that IP and where the rights came from. So like us two are the inventors, we're not employed by anybody, all our rights go to the company, that's fine. Or actually, for a while I was a postdoc and I did work on this at the university for a bit. So does the university have some rights in that technology as well? Do we need to sort that out and have a conversation with the tech transfer office? So the inventors of a patentable invention are people who came up with the core inventive concept or helped substantially develop it. So they could be people who never did any of the wet lab work. They could have come up with the idea. They could have asked other people to do the wet lab work, but they would be the inventor. And then on the other hand, you could be somebody who did every experiment to prove it works. If you didn't have the intellectual input into that, you were just told what experiments to do, you would not be an inventor. So this is where inventorship and journal publication authorship are very different. So if you're writing a manuscript for Nature, you would put all sorts of people on, people who help make a plasmid, people who, you know, it's good for their career to be on. You put those on the journal as an author, but you wouldn't put them on as an inventor. And inventorship is a legal concept, and particularly in the US, I think getting inventorship wrong can invalidate patents. So it's something you need to get right. The other downside of getting it wrong is, like I said, the rights in invention tend to flow from an inventor to their employer. So particularly in academic institutes, if you name an inventor that's from a different university, then you end up with two universities owning the invention. And co-ownership, it's not something you can't do, but it does get complicated, because if there are two applicants and two owners of a patent, depending where you are, like for example in the UK, neither one of them can do something with it without the permission of the other. So if you're a company and you want to license it to Merck, you can't do that unless the other applicant says that's okay. So joint ownership would tend to try and avoid it. And if you do have, say you've got two inventors from different institutes, then you might agree an assignment from one institute to the other. So yes, they did own the rights, but they're giving them to the other institute, maybe for some royalties and that kind of stuff. So there is still just one owner. And yeah, again, it's going back to the academic side really, but maybe there's government grant funding as well for companies where sometimes there are obligations around ownership and who owns what. So if there's a government agency that funds some research, maybe they want some of the IP. So this is all the kind of thing you'd need to look at for due diligence and make sure you and your company own what you need to own. I've just kind of covered this really. So if you're going to a collaboration. So if me and you are working together, I've got my own background IP, which is mine, and I would have that written into contract. This is what I'm contributing. We'd have it written in, this is what you're contributing, and we're working together to create something new. You want to make sure that that contract also explicitly sets out who will own that new stuff and how it's going to be dealt with. and the ones that I've worked on, even if you kind of think you're anticipating every scenario, when it actually happens, there's still a bit of, oh, who owns this? So sometimes there might be a development and an improvement to my background IP, and I would expect to own that. Like, say we're using my method in your process and we find out how to make my method better, I would want that. Same you would want any developments to your process, but then most of the time when there's a collaboration, the point is to create something new. So you need to make sure who's going to own that and who's going to patent it, who's going to be able to license it. Does the other party need a license to it just to keep doing what they're doing kind of as part of their normal business? So this is something, yeah. So I'm a patent attorney, so I would work with scientists and the companies on the kind of drafting, filing, getting the patents granted, freedom to operate, which I'll come on in a minute. But separately in our company, we also have IP solicitors. So they don't have the science background I've got, but they have a more of an proper in-depth law background, and they will do things like this. So they will deal with contractual things like this, sorting out who owns what IP. They'll deal with NDAs, other collaboration agreements. They'll do with licensing, which I've got a slide on in a minute. So once you've got your patent, you might not be bothered about using it yourself, but you might license it to somebody else to use for some money. They'll deal with all that kind of stuff. So make sure when you've got your company, you talk to somebody who is like an expert in IP and the contractual side as well, because it is very complicated. So something that I spoke about on the first slide was trade secrets and confidentiality. So with a patent, we're going to write it in depth. We're going to file it as a patent application, but 18 months later, it is going to get published. So if there's anything you and your business want to keep confidential, you cannot put it in a patent application because it will get published, which is fine. That's kind of the part of the bargain of the patent monopoly system, is that you get this 20-year monopoly for telling the world how you do your invention, and people can read it, they can improve on it, etc. But there are certain types of, certain things that you will be doing that you will not want people to know. And there's various reasons for that. So some things just are not patentable. So you may find that in your process, if you tweak the concentration of magnesium slightly, it helps your process. That may or may not be patentable. Sometimes it could be, but it may be something you want to keep confidential, because if you patent it, you tell the world that putting manganese in your culture method makes it better, whereas actually it might be better for you to be the only ones that know that. So you might want to keep that confidential because it's not a patentable thing, or it's hard to enforce. So if it is a method along those lines of just adding manganese to your culture media, how are you going to know if another company is or is not doing that? So patents need enforcing. Sometimes patents on their own have value because it does put people off working in that space, because nobody tends to want to infringe a patent. But if you do have a patent like that to a process, how are you going to know somebody's doing it? So those kind of things you might want to keep confidential. Another advantage of trade secrets and confidential information is that there's no time limit. As long as you can keep it confidential, you've got that advantage forever. If you start collaborating with lots of people and having to share details of this trade secret, then it becomes more susceptible to kind of leakage out of your company. So then you might want to think, actually, I might want to try and protect it because I've kept it confidential. It's not in the prior art yet. You've not published it. So there's still the option perhaps to patent it. The main disadvantage, I think, so if I've got a patent, even if you come up with the same idea totally independently, I can stop you from doing it. Doesn't matter if you've stolen it from me and we've never spoken, I have that absolute right to stop you doing something that falls in the scope of my claim. The problem with trade secrets is I cannot stop you. If you come up with that independently, I don't have the right to stop you. You can just do what you're doing. So sometimes you have to think, what are the chances of other people working in this space? And you'll know your area better than anybody else. Who else is working in this space? Is it likely that they're going to come up with the same thing that we've come up with? If so, you might want to think about patenting it. So it's confidential information. And then the higher level of this is the trade secret, which has higher legal protection in most places. And a trade secret tends to be something that is confidential. You keep it basically keep it more, you put more steps in to keep it confidential than your normal confidential information. So you might limit the knowledge of the trade secret to 2 people in the company, it's password protected, etc. And it's got to have commercial value because it's confidential. So if that trade secret became public, then your business would be harmed. So there is this interplay between patents and trade secrets. On the one hand, patents get published, trade secrets are confidential. The confidential nature of a trade secret means that there is a potential option to patent it later on. So whenever you come up with something that is technical and clever, you do want to try and make this decision of, do we want to patent it? Do we want to keep it as a trade secret? Are we keeping it confidential for now with a view to patent it in the future? So again, this all feeds into your IP strategy. So this is something that a lot of people seem to struggle to get their head around, and I judge a lot of competitions, and if I ask in the freedom to operate question, I always get an answer back that shows that people don't understand it. So I won't go on this for too long, but briefly. So a patent gives me the right to stop someone doing it. So I've engineered my enzyme, I've made a mutation at residue 100, it's really good, really fast, I'm patenting it. Which is fine, it's new, it's clever, I can patent it. But if somebody has a patent right to using that enzyme generally in stuff, then although I've got my own clever patentable mutation of that enzyme, if that enzyme falls in the scope of their claim, then I'm still infringing their claim. So this is called checking, freedom to operate. So do I have the freedom to make my mutated enzyme without infringing other people's patents? So this is something that businesses should look at, whether you've got your own patent or not, because whether I'm doing something clever myself is totally relevant. You need to think, am I doing something which steps inside somebody else's patent? So it could be, yeah, I've got my clever mutated enzyme, but I've used a PCR method to make it, and that PCR method might have got patent protection around it. So it's hard to know sometimes how far out from the kind of core clever thing you're doing is to go with the freedom to operate, but you tend to want to focus on the kind of critical things. So in that case, if my mutation is in, I don't know, let's say it's an enzyme called examplase, and someone's got a patent to that examplase enzyme, I can't really change what I'm doing. If I need that enzyme, I need that enzyme. I can't design around it. But sometimes it's possible to say your commercial method uses certain antibody to detect the presence of a target, and you find, oh well, that antibody's got patent rights around it. If I use it, I'm infringing that patent. If you know that early enough in development, you can think, oh, actually, that antibody could be anything. It could be a different antibody. It could be a different detection method. So that's what we call design around. So you know what's out there, and you think, well, I don't want to infringe this patent. I don't want to take a license. I'm going to change what I'm doing in a not really meaningful way, because it's not really changing the core clever thing that I want to do. I'm just using something else that has hopefully got freedom to operate on. So to do freedom to operate, you can, at the early stages, do a bit of a patent search yourself. You can look on Google Patents or a SPASnet, which I've got a slide on in a minute. You could find a few documents, and you could ask someone like us to give an opinion on them. Do they look like a problem? Going down the road a bit further, you would want to probably commission a search from a search analyst. So they're the people, you give them details of the invention, and then they can do a proper thorough patent search and find anything that could be a problem. So you need to remember, for freedom to operate, we're only looking at patents. If we're thinking about patentability and how clever and new your invention is, we're looking at everything. But it's only patents that have these rights associated with them. So when you're doing a freedom to operate, we don't care about Nature publications, it's patents. And it's also patents in the countries you're bothered about. So if you're only bothered about ever operating in Argentina, and you find a problematic patent, but it was only ever granted in China, then we don't care. So you need to think about the territory as well. And it has to be granted, and it has to be enforced. So quite often I get people, they'll just email me and they'll say, oh God, I found this awful thing. And I'll look and it was abandoned, or it only ever entered one country that they're not interested in. So sometimes it can be quite easy to kind of discount a problem. So you can all, if you want these slides, I can email them over. So if you want to read through some of them are like word heavy. And again, so these are slides that my IP solicitor colleague prepared and would normally go through. So these are just key things when you're talking about non-disclosure agreements and confidentiality. So like I said, if you want to patent something, you cannot tell people about it before you do. And this applies to talking to customers, collaborators. If you do any of that without a non-disclosure agreement in place, it is classed as a public disclosure. The examiner is not going to be able to find it unless the person you're talking to has written it up and put it online. But it is a public disclosure and it could be used later to invalidate your patent. So you need to make sure that you do have an NDA in place when you're disclosing details of the invention. It is possible to talk about what you're doing without giving away the key details most of the time. So again, if my patentable bit is this specific mutation, I can tell people, oh, I've got an enzyme that works better in this process. I can go that far without an NDA. I just don't want to tell them the specific bit that my patent would hinge on. So there's some do's and don'ts on there about patents, about NDAs. They are all different. They do have different time limits and all sorts of things, and you need to kind of make sure it's suitable. I know my colleagues tend to, for clients, they'll do one that is bespoke to them, which they can tinker with and change for different scenarios. So just very briefly, because I'm running out of time. So there are different ways of commercializing, so making money from your intellectual property. So you've come up with an idea, you've got your enzyme, whatever. I can either do that myself, I can scale up, I can use my enzyme to make chemical X, I can sell it directly to customers. Instead of, or as well as, I could license out the rights in this patent that I've got to other companies, so they could do it in-house themselves. And I can do that to one company. I could do it to 100 different companies. I can split my patent and the license based on country. So I could let you have it in Argentina, somebody else have it in the US, somebody else have it in China. I could let you have it in Argentina for use in E. coli, and I could let somebody in China have it for use in a different bacteria. So you can split your license up in infinite ways. And one thing you need to make sure you don't do early on is accidentally give away too many rights exclusively to one company, because you might think, oh, this is the person I want to work with, here you can have the rights to this, when actually what they needed was just a small portion of those rights, and then that keeps the rest for you to give to somebody else. So again, it's very complicated. Seek proper advice to make sure you don't get into something you can't get out of. Yeah, so basically if I license my technology out, they're going to pay me to do that. So I'm going to make more money, which is a good thing. Again, collaboration agreements. And one thing that I have picked up is that, especially the bigger companies, if you want to collaborate with a bigger company, they tend to prefer it if you have filed a patent, because that kind of clearly sets out what was yours before you started talking, because they don't want to be seen to accidentally be nicking your idea. So that's one thing where patents do help in collaboration. And obviously, a lot of the companies I work with in synthetic biology, they're all starting to work with each other because nobody can do everything. So they're all doing bits and bobs, and it is a very collaborative sector, I think. You just need to make sure, like we said early on, who owns what, who's bringing what to the table, what's going to be created, and who's going to have those rights. And you do that before you do the actual research, because once you've got something that turns out to be quite valuable, that's when people want to fight over it a bit more. And then I can stop here and we can do questions. So just very quickly, as a business, you will want an IP strategy. Yes, you should write this down as a document. Don't just keep it in your head, because investors will be like, what's your IP strategy? And you don't have to be, oh, I don't know, fumbling for words. Say, here it is. Doesn't have to be massively detailed, especially if you've got nothing, you haven't got much yet. But what I did do, and I did this because I wanted people to be able to kind of write their own template IP strategy. So you can have these and read through them. But these are a bunch of questions that I was going to put into kind of a template IP strategy. So I would have heading about your company, who you are, what's your origin story, Where have you got money from so far? What are you going to do? How are you going to make money? Are you a spin out? Are you going to license to X, Y, and Z? Are you making it all yourself? And these are all things that you can answer whether you've got IP or not. Then I'd have a list of everything you have got and things that you might get in the future. So maybe you haven't got any patents yet, but you know you're going to file on your method, you're going to file on your new enzyme, and the countries that you're interested in, etc. Do you have any kind of, because a lot of companies in biotech now have lots of data and they don't seem to realize how valuable that data is. You can't patent protect it, but it's there and it is a licensable thing that you could give other people access to. Do you need to in-license any IP? So we talked about freedom to operate. Did you find actually, yes, I need a license from X, and they're happy to give me one, and you know that then gives me freedom to operate. Have you done a freedom to operate? Like I said, it doesn't have to be massively extensive. If you're quite an early stage startup, investors won't expect it because it's not cheap. But have you had a look? Do you know who your competitors are? Do you know what patent rights they've got? So hopefully these questions can help you at least put something together. Do you have any agreements? Have you got NDAs in place? Have you collaborated with anybody? Do you need to kind of get a material license transfer agreement from somebody? Have you given your stuff to anybody? And then this one's more like demonstrating to investors that you understand IP is vital to your business. You're taking a sensible approach. You've got various policies in place. This is the person who everybody tells their inventions to, and then between the board or whoever, you decide whether you're going to patent something, keep it trade secret. And then also you probably would want entry and exit interviews. So we talked about trade secret. So you might employ somebody who's, I don't know, let's say they're coming from Coca-Cola and they know the Coca-Cola secret recipe. You don't want them to accidentally tell you that and use it in your business, because then Coca-Cola are going to come after you. Similarly, you don't want your staff leaving and taking and spreading your trade secrets, maybe because they weren't aware it's a trade secret. So when people leave, make sure they know this, you cannot tell, you cannot use it in your future work. And then a budget in an IP strategy. What realistically do you think it's going to cost over the next few years? And this is what you're asking investors for. That's why you're seeking investment, well, part of it. So we can do questions. I know you said next week there is some stuff on patent searching, but I didn't realize. So there's just a few slides that, again, you can have. It's just how ESPASnet, one of the patent databases, looks, and some kind of search tips, if that is of any use to anybody.
Yeah, that's actually very useful. Thanks. We're going to ask over email for these slides so we can send them out to teams. And yeah, next workshop is actually just kind of them practicing how to look at.
Okay.
So that will be very useful, the sites.
Okay.
To look them up. So thank you so much. I think we have a slide to thank you.
That's all right.
Thank you for being here today, for being so wonderful and agreeing to join. We really appreciate it. And I'm sure all of the teams have really enjoyed listening to you as we did. So
thank you for getting up early. I know it's not your normal time slot, so thank you.
No, it's no problem, really. So does anyone have any questions for Sarah, maybe, before we can bid her goodbye?
Yeah, I have some questions.
Yeah.
Mostly two. The first one is in biotech, I think there's like time frame, very extended time frame for innovation. Maybe you have 5 years to develop something, maybe a new drug or a strain or something, and patents tend to stretch, have a time limit, let's say. So what's the best strategy for IP if your development is so long and the patent is like very restrained?
Okay, so for some specific types of things and in different countries, and I don't know what it's like in Argentina, but in most places there are, in Europe it's called a supplementary protection certificate, and I know lots of countries have versions of it where For pharmaceutical products, and I think it's plant protection products, things that need a market authorization. So you have to go through clinical trials, it does take ages, blah, blah, blah. There's a recognition that this takes a long time. And by the time you've got to sell your product, your patent might have expired or nearly expired because it's taken so long. So in lots of places you can apply for, I think the maximum is like a 5-year extension. So there are ways in certain places to get the actual patent term extended using these things. And similarly in the kind of medical field, there's things like data exclusivity. So you've got your own data package. People aren't allowed to access that until a certain time. So there are extra protections for certain things. For other kind of, I don't mean more mundane, but I've engineered a bacteria and I'm using it to make something. I don't think the development time is perhaps not as long. And there are not that I'm aware of any specific extra protections in place, but what you would be doing during that time is constantly innovating anyway. So if I file a patent application today, fine, I might use that to raise investment, but it might be that in 2 years' time I've actually moved away from the original strain and I've made something better, and I might want to keep this one going, or I might decide to abandon it and just go with a new patent filing, which then starts 2 years later. So most companies will be trying to building up a pipeline of not filing every 2 minutes because that'd be too expensive, but a constant kind of protecting different bits of what you're doing over time. So yeah, I think I'm trying to think it's if I engineered a microbe today, will I still be using that same thing in 20 years time? I don't know. I'll probably moved on to something else. So I expect a lot of the companies I work with will not be still, unless they're in the pharmaceutical space, will not be still using the patents they filed today. In 20 years, they'll have got something else.
Right. And the second question would be, being a small startup, the capital you have is very limited.
Yeah.
And IP strategy is very costly to defend, and to be aware of other companies doing the same thing and being able to defend your patent.
Yeah.
In those cases, what's the general recommendation for small startups to have the capital to compete to defend the patents against bigger players?
Yeah, so I guess it depends which way around you mean. So if I've got a patent and you're infringing my patent, it's up to me to take that action to enforce it, and that is my choice. If I can't afford it, I can't afford it. I can probably do small things like write to you and make you aware of it and say, do you want to take a license? And then they may say, yes, I do. And depending on who they are, and you might be able to pay me to use my patent. If I have a patent granted and someone wants to try and knock it out, so invalidate it, that's the point where actually, if I take no action, my patent could well be lost. And that's the point, I think, where you either have no choice of find the money somehow, I guess. And a lot of companies will do bits and bobs that they can to help you for low cost. Depends what it is. So in Europe, for example, we've got the European patent system, which has an opposition period where maybe it's £20,000 to knock something out shortly after it's granted. But once it's past that stage, and if it's in a national court, like in most other countries, that can be hundreds of thousands of pounds. So the company wanting to knock it out has to be serious also. But I think most of these things do tend to settle before they get that far. So if you want to knock on my patent, maybe you've got reason to think mine's invalid, in which case I might say, okay, yes, just use it, have a license. I won't tell anyone if you don't. Yes, so most of the things settle and they don't go to court. So lots of these kind of deals do go on. But in terms of, like, I think you mentioned, searching to see what other companies are out there and things like that. Like I said, a lot you can do yourself on Espasnet. The company I used to do a patent search, it's about £4,000. So it's not cheap, but it's also not loads. And then the way we would work is we can send you the results and you can look at them, or we can work out, actually, we're going to look at the top 10 worst ones and that kind of thing. So there are ways of managing budgets and doing kind of tailored things that fit your budget at the time. But the big one, if somebody just wants to knock your patent out, that's the, yeah. Or you say, actually, acquire my entire company for millions of pounds, take it.
Right. Okay, thank you, Sarah.
That's all right.
So we have 2 questions from the YouTube live stream. Just to clarify, the YouTube people that were watching it over there missed the first 20 minutes or so of your lecture, Sarah, because we had some trouble with the audio. I don't know if you can hear me.
I can hear you.
And so, yeah, because my internet connection stability comes and goes. But Gonzalo says, thank you very much for the talk. And he has 2 questions. He initially asked if the initial strategy to start the patenting process is by publishing in a scientific journal. And then secondly, he asked if he has a potential patentable project and needs technical help, what's a good way to prove that he was the one who started that project? And he asked if uploading the algorithm to a public platform like GitHub would work. Again, the people on YouTube missed the beginning of the lecture.
Okay, so the key thing to take away from everything I said, which you missed probably, is don't publish your research before you file a patent. So to get a patent granted, your innovation has to be new. And if you've published it before you file a patent application, it's not new. So please don't publish in a journal and then think about filing something. You can do it the other way around. So file an application, get that on file, and then even the next day you can publish it if you need to, if you're academic research, that's fine. In terms of proving who was the first, I don't think that tends to matter anymore. It's more who filed it first. So me and you could independently come up with the same innovation. I get off the mark faster, I file my application. Maybe they're even identical. You're doing something very identical to what I'm doing. I would have today's filing date, maybe you file next week. Fine, you can file your application. Yours would have to be new compared to mine, so it would have to be different. So there's still a chance you could get something granted, but because I got there early with the filing date, I'm in the better position. What you and your company, I don't know how this applies outside the UK, but I'm sure there are provisions for it. We've got prior user rights. So if you can show, and this is where maybe some of the evidence does come into play, if you can show that you were doing what you were doing even before I filed my application, especially in the UK, you are allowed to continue to do that. That won't be an infringement of my patent. But the problem is that right is quite limited. So you are only allowed to carry on doing what you were doing. You can't change it. You can't make it better, because then that would infringe my patent. You also can't do anything with that right. You can't give it to somebody else. You can't license it out. So if part of your business was, I don't know, you're going to license the technology to another company, you can't license the right, carry on doing what you're doing to that company. They would then infringe. So I think, yes, keep good records of everything. Don't publish it. If you want to file a patent, file something as soon as you can. My area of expertise is not algorithms and software, so I can't really comment on that, but I would not be uploading anything until I've thought about it properly. And perhaps if you want to speak to somebody here who deals with that kind of stuff, I can put you in touch. They'd be very happy to chat. I don't give you the wrong advice, but generally don't share what you've got before you file the patent application, if that helps.
Amazing. So does anybody from the Genesis program have any more questions for Sarah before we can say goodbye? Either way, we're going to ask for her slides. And yeah, as you might have noticed, she's incredibly kind. So I'm sure if anybody has any questions later, we can
shout out.
Okay, so nobody's speaking up, so I'm assuming nobody has any questions. Thank you again so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and good luck to everybody.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.